Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City, Surprise, Arizona. What the hell did Sun City come from? I know that's where I used to be. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1587. You can cross that one off now. How traditions start. So I thought this was a really cool topic, and it goes very well with the movie that we're going to be talking about tonight. But first, several of you have asked me what I thought about, what was it? The Man Who Invented Christmas, which I watched last night. It came out in 2017. The Man Who Invented Christmas is about Charles Dickens and writing of a Christmas, how he came to write A Christmas Carol. Now, he had written Oliver Twist a few years beforehand. Then he had 3 books that bombed, and the publishers were a little reluctant to go back. But he got there. He wrote a book called, it was a short story called A Christmas Carol. This movie was actually pretty good because I didn't know a lot about Charles Dickens except for that he wrote these really cool books, some really cool books. And the book I was thinking about last night with the starting off with the woman in the wedding dress was Great Expectations. I don't know why I was thinking of the Tale of, was it The Tale of Two Cities? I haven't read that one. But Great Expectations I read a long time ago. But anyway, so this one is about how he comes to write A Christmas Carol and how he gets his characters and things. And apparently he was a guy that when he was out and about, he would hear names and he would just write them he would write names in this little notebook. And I thought, well, I do that too. I hear names that I like. Sometimes I'll ask a person if they got a very unusual name. I go, where did that name come from? And they may give me the history behind it. They may be able to tell me the story behind it, but sometimes they don't. And so I'm sort of like, well, how do you spell that? And I actually write it down. And so I collect names because you never know when you need a name for a character in a book or something, or in a story. And so I've got this whole collection of names that I've picked up over the time. And if they're able to give me the origin of the name, like, oh, it came from such and such a country, or it's a very popular name there, or somebody one time, what was their name? Can't remember what their name was, but it was a very unusual sounding name. And I said, well, that's unusual. How did that, where did that name come from? She turns around and says, well, my mother couldn't decide between this name and this name, so combined them into one. I went, that's a cool story. And that's how she got that name. And for those of you who have ever seen like Braylon, Bralen, and wondering how we came up with that, half of Brad, half of Helen, or half of Bradley, half of Helen. That's how we came up with Braylon, BRA from Brad and Len from Helen. But Brad wanted to call it Headley, and I was like, no, we're not doing Headley. And he's like, why is that? And I said, because Headley reminds me too much of Headley Lamar from Blazing Saddles. And he was like, who? From what? So we watched Blazing Saddles that night, and he got to see the actions and the antics of Headley Lamar. And if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's but I will warn you, it is totally and utterly politically incorrect. My favorite type of movie. But it was brought out in like the 70s, I think it was. I have to look that up. But anyway, so A Man Who Invented Christmas, The Man Who Invented Christmas. So Charles Dickens argues with talking with the publishers and everything. They're not really gonna publish this book. He has to come up with this book idea and all this, and he didn't really have one. So he starts picking up ideas from around places, things that he sees. Like he goes this funeral for Ebenezer Scrooge, who was an actual person, and there's nobody at the funeral except for there's one person at the funeral. That's it. And so he tucks that away for later. And then as he starts developing the story and coming up with different ideas for the story, he starts meeting the ghosts of his characters, which is kind of interesting. And he starts getting stuck into this world with his characters that nobody can see but him. And then there's, things that are brought to light from his childhood and memories that come up. And then his father turns up and more memories are brought up. So it's basically, it was a very good, it was basically a drama, but it did have little comedy moments in there. But I really enjoyed it. It was really good. And I have to tell you, Christopher Plummer as Ebenezer Scrooge was awesome. And there is this one scene, it's towards the end, and they have Ebenezer Scrooge, which is played by Christopher Plummer, standing in in a grave, and you can see the roots and you can see the dirt walls, you can see the roots, you can see the worms and all of that that are moving around. I don't know, it was really, and the way they had it lit and the way they'd done his makeup was incredible. I have to say that was kudos to the set designers and the makeup artists and the lighting guys for how they made him look so pale and withdrawn. Basically made him look like a living dead person, not a zombie, but a living dead. And so that was and through his conversation with Ebenezer Scrooge, as Ebenezer Scrooge is in this grave, and the walls are starting to close in on him, through the conversation that Charles Dickens has with Ebenezer, he comes up with the ending of the book. And because he had written the first 4 chapters and he was getting it ready, it was actually going to self-publish it. And so he ran home, he wrote the final stanza. Stands? Oh, what was that word? Stanza. He wrote the final chapter of the book, and then he had to get it to the printers on time. So he did get it to the printers a little late, but he got it in there. His book was released on the 19th of December, 1843. And by Christmas Eve, he had sold out of all the copies that he had created. And he had spent a fortune having this guy gold gild the pages, the red leather cover with the gold writing on it, the plates that were put inside, which are the illustrations that were in there, all beautifully typed. And they showed you the inside of the book. It was gorgeous. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I don't remember how many he had printed, but they sold out by Christmas Eve. So released on the 19th of December, 1843, and by Christmas Eve, he was sold out. And then I think that it was at that point the publishers picked it up. I can't remember that, but for a first time through, it was a very enjoyable movie. I can't wait to see it again and pick up different pieces. And you get to meet all of his kids and their different personalities. And he has this really cool nanny whose story is from Ireland, and she was telling the story that's been passed down through generations. And the thing that I liked about this movie, and I'm like sitting there and going, there's a lot of family stuff in here. The little Irish nanny is telling Charles Dickens about her grandmother who had passed the story that he overheard her telling his kids, that she had passed it down, and it was repeated every Christmas, because at Christmas, Christmas Eve is when supposedly the veil between the two worlds is very thin, and that's where the whole thing of Christmas Eve came from, and having the ghosts of past, present, and future. He got to meet the ghosts of past, present, and future in his own life as he's writing those stories. It was just an incredible movie. So if you get a chance to see The Man Who Invented Christmas, please watch it. It was a really cool movie. I enjoyed it very much. And tonight, so we're on to tonight's one. And tonight I've titled How Traditions Start. Now, I love traditions. I love finding out, if you go to somebody's place and they have a family tradition, we've done this for years, how did it start? How did your traditions start? Do you know? You've had traditions passed down through the years for different, for birthdays, for Christmas, for Hanukkah, for Easter, for Kwanzaa, for what are some of the other holidays? Thanksgiving, Mother's Day, Father's Day. Has there been traditions that have been passed down through your generations for different things on how different holidays are celebrated? Is there a family recipe that's been passed down through generations? Is there a certain thing that you do as part of these family traditions? Is there a game that you play every the holiday when the family's together? What traditions do you have, and how did they get started? Do you know the origin of the traditions that you have in your family? So this is something that you can find out when you're doing your family history research. You may find out how the traditions started. Not necessarily, though. You may find it through family story. Somebody in the family who is of that generation, of the older generation, may know how it started. So ask them. If you've still got grandparents, great-grandparents alive, ask them. And in some cases, great-great-grandparents, ask them how that tradition got started and see if they know the story behind it, and record it for future generations, for those coming behind you. So this one that we're watching tonight is called Santa and Pete. Now, Santa and Pete I stumbled across this movie, about 4 years ago, I think it was. Was either the first Christmas after Brad passed, or it was the one after that. So it was either in 2017 or 2018 that I watched this one for the first time. Actually, it wouldn't have been 2018 because I was down in New Zealand for Christmas. It was a last-minute trip. Yes. Shocked my brother. It was awesome. Total surprise of my brother. My parents were in on that surprise. I'd warned my father beforehand. I said, I've sent you an email, but Dad, please make sure you turn your hearing aids off. Because I knew my mother would be very excited about that announcement that I was coming home for Christmas. I was on a cruise ship. We boarded the cruise ship on my birthday, and I was on there with how many travel professionals did we have on? I don't even remember how many. We had a group of travel professionals on that, and it was on Carnival Horizon, and I've been part of the, what was it called? Travel Partners Advisory Committee. And I've been on that for 2 years. The first year they said, oh, we didn't really do a lot, so do you mind all staying on? The next year I said, yeah. I said, yeah, okay. And so 2017 was my second year on that. No, 2017 was my first year. 2018 was my second year on it. And, even through all the grief and everything else, I'm still like, yeah, I'll do it. And so at the end of 2018, they took us on Carnival Horizon, which was one of their new ships. And we had a blast. It was my second cruise by myself since Brad had passed. And this one was a lot easier, simply because I knew a lot of people that were already on the ship. There were some people from Cruise Planner's head office. There was some other Cruise Planner travel professionals on there as well. So I got to catch up with some people I hadn't seen for a while. I got to hang out with some new people I got to meet. It was really, really cool. So 2018, I wouldn't have seen that movie. So it must have been the one when I had Zeffie, 2019. Anyway, so I've only been watching it 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 years since I first saw it. And this film is really cool. It's all about traditions. How did Santa get his red suit? How did Santa end up with a sleigh with reindeer that flew? How did Santa come to put, how did you go about hanging stockings out each night for gifts? And all these sorts of things that you find out about Father Christmas and Santa Claus, and that, how did he become, and they always said it started off with Saint Nick. Well, Saint Nick at the beginning of this movie is, he's out there, he's checking on all the kids. He's got this big book that he carries with him. So it's the naughty and nice list. He's got this big book that he carries with him. And he's always traveling around and going through different countries and things, and checking in on children and everything else. And then he ends up getting arrested as a spy in, I think it's Spain. I want to say it's Spain. Ends up getting arrested as a spy. And so he ends up, and he's got this reputation. And so, of course, they put him into this cell by himself, and his book. It's interesting because when anybody else but Saint Nick opens the book, there's nothing in there. It's all blank pages. So they're trying to figure out how to get the writing to appear and all this sort of stuff and everything else. And he meets this Spanish slave. I think he's Spanish. Must have been Spanish. Spain. I think it was Spain. He meets this slave called Pete. And so Pete helps as a black guy and helps. And so it's all part of the story. If you're wise enough, you may find out things. Actually, no, I've forgotten. At the very beginning, James Earl Jones is there. He plays the grandfather, and he's there decorating the tree. His daughter's there with her husband and their son Terrence. So the grandson's Terrence, and they pull out this snow globe which has Santa Claus in there with this black man who's got the one of the things it's like he's got a turban on his head, and almost looks like somebody out of Alibaba. And the 40 Thieves or Aladdin with the turban on the head and the balloon pants, that sort of thing. And he asks, who is this? And he goes, well, that's Santa and Pete. He goes, Pete? Who's Pete? And so they start talking about the story. And this is a story that gets told every year at Christmas. So a family tradition. But how did it get started? And so as James Earl Jones sits down and is telling his grandson about the story, and you flip between the modern day when the story's been told into the story. And so as James Earl Jones' character grandfather is sharing the story, you get to see it the other way. So he's telling the story about how they got he got arrested and all that, or how Saint Nick got arrested, and the slave recognized that this was Saint Nick, and so he helps Saint Nick escape, and then they go off on this wild adventure and everything else. They eventually end up on a ship to the New World, which of course is America at the time, but it wasn't named America at the time. They were going to the New World, and they meet up with families over there, and they start traveling around, and they get to know the Native American Indians. They get to know the people who have come from England and Europe and stuff to settle in the New World. And as he's there, and it's getting close to Christmas time, there's certain weather things that happen. There's certain things that happen, and all of a sudden he's got a sleigh. He no longer has wheels. His horse gets stolen, so he ends up with reindeer, and all these things just start slowly as they're going through this, as they're going through the different, through the season, getting closer to Christmas, things just start changing one by one. But how he gets the reindeer to fly, that's a really cool story. Part of the story. It's one of my favorite bits. But it's just a really cool story about, Saint Nick and Pete traveling around together as traveling companions and continuing his work. And he now has an assistant with him. And then they end up in the New World, and how things start to change till we get the Santa Claus that we know today. And so this is what this whole story is about. And then there is a beautiful twist at the end. But the thing I like about this is it's how do traditions start? When you're looking at, coming up on Christmas, what traditions do your family have for Christmas? What do you have for Hanukkah? Because Hanukkah starts, I believe it's this Friday. It's the first day of Hanukkah on Friday. And then you've got Kwanzaa, which is on the 26th of December, or as most of England, Australia, New Zealand, Canada call it Boxing Day. That's another day we get off. So we get Christmas and Boxing Day off. But so as these traditions, traditions change over time, but how do they get started? And then what changes occur over the years based on what's happening in the world, what's happening around you? Can you still do this? Well, that ingredient's not available anymore. Well, now we've got to substitute it for something else, because then it won't taste like great grandma's fruitcake. We have fruitcake for Christmas, and fruitcake comes with marzipan. Hang on, I can remember the order of this. Yeah. So you have the fruitcake, and that's made in some places it's made several months beforehand. And then while it's still, curing, some people will pour brandy over it, like once a month, pour brandy over it. And they use a toothpick to poke holes into the thing, so the brandy soaks down into the cake. So by the time you get to eat the cake, you really only want to eat. That's why if you're in New Zealand or Australia or England or something like that, and you're only getting given a small piece of cake, be very careful, because it may contain brandy, and you only need a small piece. But then when we ice it, we use marzipan icing. No, hang on, the almond icing, and then marzipan over top. There's a thin cream layer icing that goes underneath, and it's all going to be rolled out and laid over and smoothed out and decorated that way. So it's a traditional fruit cake with the marzipan and the almond icing on it, and all decorated with Christmas stuff on there. And so some of those could be a little lethal, and as far as booze goes, they might just have a little too much. That's why you have a small piece. But then there's those that don't do the booze on the cake. But I will tell you this: I have made a fruit cake, and the fruit cake called for brandy to be put in with the fruit, and then you boil it. Word of caution: if you are somebody who doesn't drink, stand clear, put the expel air on, the range hood on, whatever you need to pull those fumes away from the pot, and make sure you stand a distance away, because you have to keep stirring this thing while it's boiling. And you've got brandy in there, and so you're boiling off all the alcohol. And if you're breathing that in, you're going to be high as a kite by the time you finish this thing. Ask me how I know. I'm not someone who drinks. But yeah, that one kind of kicked me in the pants on that one. I found a little woozy afterwards, but still got the cake made, and it turned out pretty good. Icing it was another story, because that stuff is really sticky, and there's a certain way you've got to roll it out, and it sticks to everything. But I got it done. That was my very first Christmas cake that I made. And boiling it when you've got brandy in there with the fruit, you can actually get very high off those fumes. And so so my word of caution is, if you are making a traditional fruit cake and it calls for alcohol to be in with the fruit, please make sure you have a fan on, like on the range hood, to pull those fumes away, and make sure you stand well back, but still close enough that you can stir, but keep your head as far away from that pot as possible. Otherwise, you'll end up getting high on the alcoholic fumes. Just a word of caution. So yeah, so Santa and Pete is a really cool movie. It came out in 1999. Let's see if I can find out any more. Just gonna see if they got the cast here. They had, James Earl Jones played Grandpa Nicholas. Just trying to see if there's other. Tempest Bledsoe from Bill Cosby. She's in this as well, and she plays one of the people in the New World, and it's a family that they get to know very well. Just seeing what other names in here that I know. Those are the only two names I know. Yeah, in the cast list that I'm looking at here, those are the only two names that I know. And yeah, it is a Spanish prison that he ends up in. Yeah, the New World or New Amsterdam is what they called it at the time. And the story was adapted from a novel of the same name that comes from a Dutch legend. And it first appeared on CBS on December the 5th, 1999, and wasn't released on DVD until 2008. So that was a lot of, but it's a beautiful story. There's a lot of comedy, and there's a lot of funny little moments in there when things happen as to how he ends up with, they end up having people use stockings, because in Holland they put the clogs out for Saint Nick to leave something behind in the clogs, and how. And so in the New World, you find how it gets switched from shoes to the stockings. So anyway, sorry, my messages are starting to go nuts. So we'll just turn that off for a bit. So yeah, so it's interesting just to see, how did he end up with a red suit? How did he end up with flying reindeer? How did he end up with a sleigh instead of a buggy and the cart that, what do they call it that he was in? The carriage. No, not the carriage. The wagon. I'm trying to remember what it was now. I have to go watch. I'm going to go watch the movie and figure it out. So anyway, go out, enjoy your evening. If you get a chance, go watch Santa and Pete. It is available for free on Prime. If you're a Prime member, it is available for free there. And so we're going to go watch that for tonight. And like I said, it's a really, really cool movie. So I've enjoyed it. Must have been 2019 when I first saw it, because I've watched it every year since. But anyway, have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we will see you guys back here tomorrow evening at 6 p.m. Pacific. Hey, konera.